Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our Backpack to Briefcase today. We are here with Chris Bingham, who's a graduate of the Huntsman School of Business, graduated in 2004 with an MBA, but was also an Aggie beforehand, just telling me he's studying biology, adventuring up in Logan Canyon, which is pretty great. So for the last 15 years, he has been working as a medical device executive with leading marketing, strategy, and M&A. Currently, he is a VP of Global Marketing and Strategy at Advanced Bionics, which is down in St. George here in Utah. And today he's here to talk to us about professional mentors and mentorships and how we build that, which is perfect timing. We had a leadership forum earlier this morning with Derek White at Google, and he mentioned that mentors was the strategy to go for professional development and growth. So welcome, Chris. We're excited to have you.
Thanks. Super excited for the opportunity to be back and get to talk to fellow Aggies. So I'm going to go ahead, guys, and share my screen. I'm going to walk through some thoughts via PowerPoint. So just hold on just a moment here. Elise, can you see my screen all right? Perfect. So, guys, I'm going to start out with just a quick introduction of myself. As Elise suggested, did a BS in biology at Utah State 2003, followed up by MBA in 2004. And background-wise, I came from a family of predominantly dentists and doctors, and so I always had an interest in healthcare in general. And then really through some experiences in Logan, working at some local med tech businesses, became interested in the business side of healthcare. And so post MBA rather, went out into the world of business and first started working at Medtronic. And Medtronic, if you're not familiar, is a Fortune 100 healthcare company, was the company that invented the first pacemaker and is the largest pure play medical device company in the world. And so I worked predominantly in the vascular space. So thinking about kind of treating hearts and treating arteries, et cetera. And spent about 13 years. And it was an amazing place to start out. I had a variety of opportunities to work in more commercial marketing, more upstream marketing, which is working with engineers on future product development. Also really looking at mergers and acquisition and strategy. So again, it was a very broad-based experience, which I think really kind of set the stage to be able to do some other cool things. I then went and spent a couple years at Abbott Labs, which is, again, another Fortune 100 diversified healthcare company that plays in the pharmaceutical space, also in the med device space. And I ran, it was VP of Global Marketing based in Austin, Texas, which Austin was a great place to live. Worked in a business where we did both spinal cord stimulation for chronic pain. So we're actually using, almost think of a pacemaker stimulating the spine. And then we also did deep brain stimulation for Parkinson's and essential tremors, where you're essentially doing very similar to a pacemaker, but you're actually putting a wire down and stimulating structures in the brain. And now currently I work at Advanced Bionics. So my job is based in Southern California in Santa Clarita, but taking advantage of trying to find silver lining in all things pandemic. We're living in St. George. So we're on the sunnier and slightly warmer edge of the state. So for those in Logan right now, I won't tell you how warm it is in St. George. And then also in parallel with that, my wife and I, we've been partners in marriage for almost 20 years now, but we've extended partnership into business. And so when we were living in Austin, we opened a franchise for a salon. So relatively small franchise kind of corporation. And so we've at least opened one location in Austin and expect to open a couple of others. So it's been fun to take kind of the big corporate experience and really kind of marry that a little bit more toward a more entrepreneurial experience that we've both looked forward to. So just real quick, just so you know what I do in general kind of on a daily basis. So I currently work in an area called cochlear implants. So think about it for kids that have nerve issues that they can essentially noise goes into their ear, but it doesn't connect to their brain. And then additionally for older individuals that over time will have essentially degradation of their hearing performance. Again, it's generally some of the structures that have problems And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to bypass those structures. So you have what looks like essentially like a little larger hearing aid. And then essentially we turn that, the noise that they hear, we turn it into an electrical, essentially impulse that essentially we then put into an implant. And then that implant then stimulates essentially the nerve, the hearing nerve, the auditory nerve. So again, this is, call it a market size of about $1.5 billion. So it's a much smaller business and market size than I've competed in historically. But it's an exciting place to be. It's very much a turnaround. It's a business that's been around for 30 years, but we're really working to kind of take share and also restructure the business for greater profitability. So it's been a lot of fun. And if you've never seen these on YouTube, one of the reasons I'm really here, I love seeing what medical technology can really do for individuals who suffer from chronic health conditions. And so I'm going to show a quick clip on this next. It's a little boy named Teddy in the UK that was born without hearing. And so Teddy has never heard before. And we're going to see a quick clip of his cochlear implant being turned on for the first time and see his reactions to his parents and to hearing noise for the first time.
He's looking like he's...
Did you hear the drum?
Did he? What's that?
Wow.
Yeah.
So I love that watching that clip. Teddy is destined to essentially have a normal functional hearing life through his cochlear implant. He'll be able to enjoy music. He'll be able to go to school and really develop in the same path that any normal hearing child would. And so it's been an incredible honor to work for a company with technology to help serve kids like Teddy as well as adults. So let's really get to the piece that you're all here for. You're not interested in hearing about me. Let's talk a little bit about mentorship. I think it's fascinating. There's a ton of research that's been driven into really understanding how we really govern and provide governance for companies. And really most of that comes down to thinking about management and really board of directors. In a lot of the research, it's interesting, they'll talk about the value of a board is to provide insight, advice, et cetera, to the management team. And it's interesting then when we look at the boards of directors, when they tend to fail, it's almost always because there's not been enough thought into really the skill set and capabilities of the individual directors and their ability to provide the right level of insight and advice to the management team. So it's interesting, all of us have way more vested interest in ourselves than we do the companies that we even work for, right? We have responsibility for determining our life's direction. And so wouldn't it be a great idea for each of us to have really our own board of directors? Each of us benefit from really understanding outside perspectives and different inputs. And certainly for us to do that, the number one step is we need to really understand our own strengths and gaps, and then really work to understand what types of mentors can really then help complement and help fill in our gaps. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that today. As we really think about mentorship, I think there is some very clear differences in what mentorship looks like at different points in our career. And so today I really want to kind of break down the value of mentorship when we look from a pre-career perspective, and that really applies to a lot of you who are still studying at the Huntsman School. We'll then really talk about how essentially mentorship changes in the value when we think about early career. And then I'll talk a little bit about mid to late career, which is my wife, when we were talking about this, she wanted to remind me that I'm ever closer to late career, even though I like to pretend I'm still mid-career. And I'd also like to invite you with the team. I'm super informal, so please, as you have questions, please go ahead and shoot those in while we're talking, and we'll try to make this a little bit more of a dialogue rather than holding them to the end. So please do feel free to interrupt. So let's talk a little bit about pre-career. So when I really think about kind of the key value of mentorship here, it's really trying to fine tune our career path. And a lot of it is helping to assess where do you want to go and essentially how do you get there. One of my favorite pieces of advice around career development comes from a line from Alice in Wonderland. And Alice, remember, has come to a fork in the road. She's talking with the Cheshire Cat and asks the question, which way she should go. And the Cheshire Cat responds, that if you don't know where you're going to go, essentially any road can take you there. And I think that's really, as we think about mentorship and career planning, it's really the onus is on each of us to have a little bit of appreciation for what we want out of life. And success looks very different for each of us. When we think about the level of the number of hours we want to work, when we think about where we want to live, we think about what type of job we'd want to do, we think about the balance of what it looks like between family, career, etc. That's something that each of us are really responsible for understanding. And as we start to gain some basic understanding to that, that's where we can really start to shape our overall career plan. And I think that mentors can help us do that really effectively. I also think there's a huge amount of value when we really think about building relationships. We can also build relationships that are going to really create opportunity for us. A lot of the first job opportunities that you're likely to have will probably grow out of some of these mentorship opportunities if you do it right. So as we really then think about, again, how do we put this into practice? First and foremost, we need to think about our own kind of sphere of influence, or the people who are around us. So I mentioned earlier, I ended up in healthcare, and that wasn't by accident. I grew up with a brother who was a cardiologist. So when I was in high school, he was already practicing. And so when I'd go visit my brother, we'd end up going to the hospital and I'd follow him around. And so I kind of learned to love that, and I kind of appreciated the value that healthcare provided. And so I think for a lot of us, we're products of the overall influences in our lives. So I'd really try to assess who's already in your life, number one, and try to understand what they can teach you, and feel free to be very open to ask them questions. I think asking questions is the key to really gaining value of mentorship. But I want to focus a little bit more today on kind of, let's think a little more broadly than just maybe what we know we're exposed to. And let's think about how we would potentially build essentially a network and prepare ourselves to understand doing something potentially very different. And I really think that the place to begin and end with all of this is really LinkedIn. So as we think about LinkedIn, I just kind of went to my own LinkedIn, and I'm pretty selective. I don't necessarily, I get lots of advertisers who want to come and help me with all of my marketing problems. I try to kind of keep my network clean of that. But it's amazing. I looked at this. I think I've amassed about 3,000 people that I've connected with through career and kind of shared experiences. And so I looked at that and said, okay, if I wanted to, I love healthcare and I'm going to stay here, and it's probably all I'm really qualified to do at this point. But I looked at this and said, what would happen if I was curious for a company like Nike? Great company. The stock has performed pretty well of late. And so I looked at Nike, and come to find out, I have a common relationship with a gentleman, and I made this super low res. So you guys aren't copying down all of my secret sauce of relationships here. But I think if you look at this, I found an individual that I worked with 10 plus years ago. He and I still keep up from time to time. And then you can see a whole extended network that flows out of that relationship. Similarly, at Amazon, I didn't know that I knew anyone who worked at Amazon, but I found over 10 people that are kind of that I've worked with in the past that are now at Amazon. I was also curious. I also looked at Utah State just to see who and what I know from Utah State. And I went to page 100. I just randomly picked page 100. And interestingly enough, I found a gentleman who is currently working for a startup looking at essentially an artificial pancreas, which treats diabetes. So a lot of commonalities for what I'm kind of interested in. And also I'm a type 1 diabetic, so it was even more interesting to me. And so then I linked in with the gentleman, and we've actually had an interesting discussion, and that's all based on just preparing for this talk. So I think as you really start to assess areas that you're interested in, get on LinkedIn. And I can't say how valuable, you can't understate the value. It's an opportunity to start building a relationships. And then it's also an area where you can start to look at people's backgrounds and try to see how they've actually crafted their careers. Because a lot of us, we don't want to necessarily just reinvent the wheel. If we can learn from their paths, so much the better. So when you link in with someone, people are they're wonderful. People are generally extremely open to doing informational interviews, especially if you tell them that you're a student and you're interested in what they've done and that their career seems super interesting. People generally have enough ego. They're going to be willing to actually talk all about themselves. So don't be afraid to reach out to people and then ask them for time on the phone. And I think the real questions that I think are valuable is help for those of you who are still kind of trying to assess what you want to do. Ask them questions about how they pick their career. While a lot of us have different exposures, there's also a lot of luck and kind of other things that happen that lead us into what we end up doing. So people will be generally pretty open about talking about that. I'd also ask the question of what their average day looks like. While I understood healthcare really well, I had very little appreciation for what working in a corporate environment looked like. And there was a movie that came out just before I was in business school. So that means by definition, it's an old movie now. But hopefully you've seen it because I think it's pretty funny, called Office Space. And so in that movie, the day-to-day in an office was complete drudgery. And I was so afraid to work in a cubicle after watching that movie that I almost applied. Well, I started applying to law schools because I wasn't sure I was ready to be done with school, right? So again, that's a huge opportunity. If you look at people and ask what they do day-to-day basis, it'll give you more appreciation for what your career might really look like. I think also really understanding what they did that led to their current roles, that career development pathway, extremely important. Then also really talk to them about what does the future hold in a job like theirs? Is it another 20 years sitting in that job, or does it actually evolve and does it give future opportunities? That'll really help you to understand some of the pluses and minuses. And then also really be open and ask them for any other advice. I think anytime I ask that question and I sit back and listen, that's where I probably do the most learning. Always make sure to follow up with a thank you email. Be gracious. People are investing their time in you. And I think also if you're interested in a future role, like I said, this is a great way to start essentially planting seeds that could grow into your first job out of college. So if you see people that you enjoy talking to them, they seem like good people, they seem like they have interesting roles, be very clear that you'd actually like to work for an organization like theirs and start asking them how to do that. And I also can't, again, hopefully some of you have had Sterling Bones class on selling skills. I know that Sterling tells people to close hard, and that's for all of us. Whether we go into sales or not, we all are selling at least our very selves. So don't be shy to sell the product that you are. Close hard, ask them if they have any concerns and if there's any reason that they wouldn't hire someone like you, any reason that they don't think their company would hire someone like you. That's where you really start building bridges to really future opportunity.
So Chris, we've got a real quick question for you. So how do you get past that fear or feeling awkward in that initial reach out to people you don't know? That can be a really big barrier, especially in that pre-career or early career stage. How do you hype yourself up for that?
So I think I love sports and I love in basketball. There are people who are called volume shooters. So I really think be a volume shooter in this. Don't pick out, if you're only having one conversation, that becomes a really scary conversation. If you set yourself up to have 50 conversations, you're going to get over the fear, but also if any one conversation goes poorly, it's not the end of the world. So I think that's just a recognition that one conversation, I promise, will not make or break the rest of your life. And so recognize there's a lot less risk. And then I also think practice makes perfect. So I have group of individuals that I've mentored and I have mentors myself. I've done plenty of fake interviews with them where I walk through my talking points, they walk through their talking points preparing for interviews. So I really think that's an area, grab your roommates and do a pretend interview with your roommates. Have your mom or dad do a phone interview with you. Do what it takes to get comfortable, because that's a skill that, being comfortable talking to someone new about something that you don't know very much about, that's something you're going to do for the rest of your career. So get comfortable with the discomfort sooner than later. Any other follow-ups, Elise?
No, that was good. We do have a different question though.
Yeah,
so what if my personality doesn't match my mentor's personality? Should you be taking personality and approaches to work into consideration for mentorship relationships?
So, and I think that's a great question. And I almost put a slide in on exactly that, and then I didn't. So I clearly should have. I think there are two ways to kind of look at this. Creating a broad-based network of mentors is a good thing, because in it's, whether you call it a network or mentors, are kind of two different pieces. I would get a lot of advice from a lot of different people when you really start to look at individuals. So if I look at kind of my personal board of directors, and I actually call them that, and I tease them that they're on my personal board of directors, I generally have people that I like and people that like me, because that's a basis for an enduring relationship. But I will also say that I've picked people that have very different skill sets in views of the world than I do. Because if I'm picking all people that are my friends and people that see the same things I see, it's unlikely that they're going to give me the really broad-based, diverse input that I need to really make a well-formed decision for myself. So I think you need to make sure you can stomach being on a phone call with them for 30 minutes a couple times a year. But I don't think you need to like them enough that you're going to be going on vacations together. I think you're really looking more for, do they complement your gaps? And early on in your experience, when you've not yet found a job and a career path, by definition, everyone will complement your gaps because they're working and they understand what work life looks like. You'll want to hone that over time, really based on your individual career interests and making sure that they're kind of complementary experiences.
Yeah, I love that idea of having a diverse board of directors. I learned the exact same thing during my master's program, and your different directors can have different influences on areas of your life too. So it's really great to have that well-rounded feedback almost.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So let me talk, and I'll go through a little quicker as we talk about kind of looking at early career and as we talk about kind of mid-career, because this will be a little further away. But I think it's helpful for you to understand maybe some of the motivations of your mentors as well. So there's going to come a day when you're going to put down your backpack, and I love this is called backpack to briefcase. By the way, I never carry a briefcase. I still use backpacks everywhere. So do most I think most professionals. So don't be nervous about getting an expensive briefcase. Your needs are a little different, right? Because you now have a job. And day one, I remember being scared to death when I all of a sudden realized that I had to figure out how to do the job. So you talked your way into a company, into a role. Now you have to actually do that effectively. You're still then building for the future. You're still early in your career, and so you're trying to point to generally something down the road. And then there's also, you start to shift a little bit to really building relationships that can create future opportunities. And I think that really means future roles and upward mobility. So when I really look back at kind of my early experience, I was very, very lucky. A lot of your career, you learn to be thankful because you have luck and people that add value to you over time. And I look back and I'm not sure I totally merited it, but I remember I had a coworker that was a peer. She'd been in a role for about 8 years. And we had a boss that was a little bit challenging and was a little bit disengaged. And so she would, take me in the hallway and help explain things to me and explain how to do things that my boss probably should have been the one, but she really helped me to build a strong foundation early on. I also had others that I saw that really taught me to demonstrate both through their actions, but also through one-on-one discussion about what was really appreciated and rewarded in my first company. And then I think what was hugely beneficial is then having people that would help me understand when I was going to go in front of management teams and give presentations. They really helped me understand how to prepare for those types of meetings and how to really influence and how to really drive alignment, which I think is hugely beneficial. Some of those situations I asked for help. Others, there were people that were there and just well-intentioned and wanted to then help support me. And so I think, again, a lot of the reason why that occurred is because I tried to be a team player. If there's time, I'll tell you a little bit about how I talked my way into kind of that first job. But I came in at a much lower level than all of the other newly minted MBAs because I was the only one from a non-target business school. They told me originally they didn't hire people from non-target business schools. And I told them that I'd work for free until I showed my value. And the HR director said they couldn't figure out how to do that, so they were going to pay me. But I came in a very junior role, and so I had a little bit of a chip on my shoulder, and I was willing to do whatever it takes, whatever it took. I'd sweep the floor, etc. And I think because of that, because I came in hungry, motivated, and a little bit humble, That was really my ticket for people wanting to look out for me and help me learn and help me grow at a number of different levels. So again, as we kind of come back to this idea of future career path, you have a foot in the door, you're now working. This is where I think you really start to build your long-term mentorship kind of team. I think it's finding people who have jobs or who have skill sets that you would want. And I think that's kind of the first step. I think emulation is huge when I think about mentors. I try to isolate something that they specifically have that I don't have that I want. And really, I think I was very open with people of talking about what I saw from them, of what I appreciated. Because again, back to human ego, each of us want to feel good and want others to compliment and notice. And so that general approach for me has worked really well, is to kind of state the positive and then ask them how they essentially attained the positive. And then as we had a couple of conversations, if it felt, and back to that last question, if it felt like there was a personal fit, that's really where I would ask kind of the formalized question of, would they be willing to provide more formalized mentorship? I will also say, and so I'm 43 now, and I ventured out into the work world when I was like 25, 26. So I'm probably firmly mid-career. It's amazing when I look at the number of recruiters that call me now and jobs that are kind of put in front of me. Almost all of those jobs come because someone that I worked with in the first 5 years of my career told them that they should call me, that I would be a potentially good fit. So I really do. And as I've talked with others, it's really kind of that first portion of your career, everyone's kind of growing together. That's where a lot of your future opportunity comes from. So again, I think making sure that you not only have mentorship, but that you show up positively with your teams and your peers. That's where you really cultivate that future opportunity. Let's talk a little bit about late career. And I think there's still this component where you're trying to figure out where we want to go. Even though I'm mid-career, I'm still trying to figure out what I really want to do when I grow up. We're still creating relationships that are going to lead to opportunities. But over time, there really becomes a shift toward also becoming a mentor. And I think this is that virtuous cycle that we get value from other people, but it only works if we're then willing to kind of then pay it forward, which I hate that term, but I'm going to use it anyway. Let's really talk about what this means. I think very differently about mentorship now than I did when I was first out of school. When I was first out of school, I was trying to hit up vice presidents of marketing because that's what I wanted to do. And I was trying to hit up people that would essentially have influence on my career. I'll say very openly that the best mentors that I've had who've added the most value have actually been people that have worked for me. I think this idea, as soon as we grasp that everyone in the world can teach us something about something, that's when I think we really started to accelerate our learning. And so really being open and humble to feedback from anyone on our performance is kind of step number one. As I look for a couple of employees, at the point in time when the book Lean In, which is now kind of an old book, when that was first written, I was a young manager and I benefited from having 3 super high performing female employees that worked for me. And they were kind of going through different things. One was getting married, one was having their first child. And so going through that experience and having them really help me understand more about what it looked like to create a positive work environment for females really created lasting understanding and value that I think has made me a better manager overall, but has helped me, I think, to support other women that have worked for me to be more successful, to reach their goals. And had I not had that experience, had I not paid attention, I would have totally missed out on that. I also think as we look at our network, and I'm using kind of network and mentors interchangeably, there comes a point later in your career that I've helped drive acquisitions because I knew someone that worked somewhere else. I've been able to get things done or reach out to people in my network or mentors to really help me get my work done over time. And I think lastly, as we kind of look at this idea of becoming a mentor, and this goes a little bit into the psychology as you're picking mentors. So number one, most people do want to pay it forward, right? All of us are the product of a lot of investment from a lot of people, whether they're our parents, whether they're ex-bosses, et cetera. And so we kind of have that responsibility. Number two, there's also something super fulfilling about helping people understand what has driven you toward happiness. generally when we see things that make us happy, we want to share those things. And so I think that's a real motivation for a lot of people to mentor. And then the last one that I think is huge, one of my biggest challenges is trying to find people that I can put in my organizations that are going to help me get my job done and help me reach my personal goals. So the more that I can create a really talent pipeline that will help kind of step in and fulfill those tasks, that's hugely important. So I would say probably about 30 to 40% of people that I've mentored in corporate environments, I've ended up trying to hire them into my team because I was like, that person can perfectly plug and play. So again, this is your ulterior motive, that while you're trying to get feedback, et cetera, you're also really creating future opportunity for yourselves. So I'll pause. Elise, any other questions pop up at this point?
Yeah, so I love that you brought up paying it forward. Coming to the Huntsman School, that's something that really feels like it's embedded into the culture that we have. So do you have any tips about being a quality mentor for upperclassmen or those soon-to-be graduates as they move into their career? So yeah, what tips for being a quality mentor do you have for others?
I think probably the first and foremost, it's very easy when people come and ask for advice. And this is probably an important one for all of us as well. People generally give advice that is very autobiographical, meaning if someone says, how do I do a job like yours? My autopilot response is going to be to walk through my career path and tell them these are the things that I did. And so in effect, they should do those exact same things. I think being, whether you're a mentor or a mentee, I think really pausing and listening and really understanding the specific goals, really getting to understand, some of the drivers that might be helpful to a mentee. That's really important so you can give more tailored and specialized advice. Otherwise, you're really just telling them about yourself. So, but that's hard to do because again, it's easy for us to all go back to our comfort zone, which is what we know and what we've done.
It's great. We also have a question about timing and how much of your mentor's time do you take up? How often do you keep in contact? What are some guidelines for maintaining contact?
So I'm glad that leads me perfectly. So whoever wrote that in, I owe you $5 for helping me with the transition, or maybe 10. So let's talk a little bit about what it looks like to be a good mentee. Because I've had, so it's interesting, the mentorship experiences that I've had where they've worked well, both for me as a mentee and for me as a mentor, have generally been the more authentic, where we've kind of sought each other out and it just kind of works well. You'll notice in corporate environments, quite oftentimes, they'll actually try to set up formalized mentorships where they try to do almost like speed dating and then pair people together. Those oftentimes work terribly. And I think a lot of it's because some of these base values just aren't, they aren't kind of arrived at authentically. So I think the first one is being thoughtful and respectful. Recognize when you think about a mentor, they have a job, they might have a family, they have other career interests. And you probably, as much as you're wonderful, you fall fairly far down that list of priorities and to-dos. So I think it's recognizing that you want to, when you want to have a discussion, get on their books early, make sure that you are taking kind of 30 minutes to an hour is probably the most you're going to get, maybe a lunch here or there. And I think when I look at most of my mentors, I try to connect 2 or 3 times a year for formal mentoring, and that's kind of a maximum. I may have a lot of other informal, like sending them snarky texts or whatever, just to kind of because we become friends over time. So I think that's the first one. The next one is being appreciative, and it's recognizing that they're doing this, although they may have ulterior motives of wanting to hire people or their own personal fulfillment. They are taking of their own time, and they're clear trade-offs. I think number 3, and this is probably the biggest, I've had people who say, will you be a mentor? And I'll say, sure. And then I ask the question, what specifically are you looking for help with? And then they look and say, well, I don't really know. That's kind of a clear recipe for value not being created. So do really be thoughtful of what are the decisions you're trying to make in your life, whether they're professional, personal, whatever. Be very clear about those, and then be clear about the feedback you're looking at from your mentor, versus if there are things where you've already made up your mind and you don't want anyone challenging your values, then make sure they know those are already made decisions and are kind of non-negotiable. Following up and following through. Nothing will take someone out of like the group of mentees that I support faster than if they stand me up for meetings, and that happens. Make sure that if you say you're going to do something, you're going to read a book, you're going to do something, you're kind of on the hook to do that. I also think just really being open and honest, making sure that you're asking for advice doesn't mean you have to do what they say. That's not how mentorship works. But you need to be open enough to think about it and really test some of your own values to make sure that you're thinking in some of your own decisions, to make sure that you're on the right path and that you're effectively assessing what's being given to you. Adding these last ones, and I think these are the ones that are like the top of the list. Figure out how to add value to your mentor. Like I'm old enough, like in my I'll say young 40s. I don't know if that probably sounds really old to most of you listening, but there are a lot of components of marketing. Most marketing people are relatively young, and there are new technologies, there are new ways that people interact with the world. I personally like hate social media, which is a challenge being in marketing. And so I love when there are younger, more experienced people with social media that help me understand trends and how we can better reach some of our potential consumers. So that's an area that they can really add value to me. So don't be afraid to share your view of the world. It'll be a value. Be a credit to your mentor. That means work hard. That means do well in your career. It means be a good person. They want to be associated with people who are going places, and they want to be able to rejoice, or they want to celebrate your successes. So make sure they understand your successes, but make sure you have them. And then I think really, again, looking at opportunities, it's coming back to that pay it forward component of how do you really help support others. So I think this is you're looking at kind of cultivating relationships that are going to be sustainable over time. This is where I really kind of highlight these areas. And a lot of these, I hate to say, like chalk down as being a good, normal, hardworking person. Any other questions that come up, Elise?
I think we're all great, but I would love to hear like pieces of advice or like final thoughts on like large, broad of how to dare mighty things. It was going to be my thing. So perfect transition.
Perfect. Again, Elise, I'll owe you the $10 this time. I'm going to say, number one, I'm super jealous of those of you who are still in school. I loved my experience. It was still the Utah State School of Business when I was there. But I really I was super happy when I got to change my resume to say it was the John M. Huntsman School of Business. I'm very jealous because you have a lot of programs and resources that I don't think fully existed when I went to school. And maybe they did, and maybe I just wasn't paying attention. But I'm excited. I think that the value of education coming through the Utah State Business School has grown significantly in kind of the 18 whatever years since I was there. So number one, you should feel very confident that as you go out into the world, that I think you're being very well prepared to understand what the real world looks like. And I think that you are really going to have a nice runway to go out and do some good things. I love this idea of daring mighty things. When I really look at that, I think the first component is really all of us need to have a plan. I love, and I don't know who actually first penned it, but I love the quote that if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. If you don't understand what you want out of life, it's unlikely that you're going to reach full potential. And that potential is, as I said, is very different from all of us. It doesn't mean you go lock yourself into a corporate job and work 80 hours a week. It doesn't mean that you go start some type of high risk venture. That can look very different from each of us. You may want a job that is going to be a solid 40-hour-a-week job with benefits that's going to allow you to take care of a family. And that's what fulfillment looks like for you. But if you don't have a plan, it's unlikely that you're going to, again, get the best out of life. Number two is figure out how to get outside of your comfort zone and take risks. I love the question earlier of how do we get comfortable with a phone call? The best way to get comfortable with a phone call is to make a lot of them. And I've really benefited. We were chatting earlier, Elise and I, I've had an opportunity. We've moved around a fair amount. Every 3 years or so, we've had some type of corporate move. So we've lived in California 3 different times, lived in Minnesota, living in Utah right now. We lived in Zurich, Switzerland for a couple of years with an expat opportunity. Those were all things that for certain reasons or another, we listened to in Austin, Texas as well. I won't forget Austin because I now feel like a transplanted Texan. But as we look at all those, there was something about those that was definitely outside of our family comfort zone. But I really think as my wife and I have talked about it, we feel like our life has been enriched from all of those different experiences. And we wouldn't bat an eye to do that all over again. I think also there are lots of, thinking about the first presentation that I made to a CEO at Medtronic, I was scared to death. And then the way you get through that is you keep doing those and they eventually get more and more comfortable and it becomes really the strong suit. And I think it's not that those things get easier, but I think it's really our ability and resolve strengthens, and our ability to complete those tasks is what really grows. So lean into being uncomfortable because that's what makes you better. Working hard, I think, is number one. I mentioned about my early career. So the target business schools, when I went to work at Medtronic, and Medtronic is a Fortune 100, they're a little bit academically elite in some of their recruiting practices. So the key business schools, it's based in Minnesota. So they have University of Minnesota, which feels like an outlier, but a Harvard Business School, Yale, MIT in Northwestern, so Kellogg School of Business, were the target business schools at the time. So I was hired into a division and there were 16 other MBAs, and I started 2 rungs lower than all of those others. I think the values that you're taught at Utah State, and maybe some of the shared culture as well, hard work is an incredible advantage that I think we learn that a lot of other places don't instill in their students. And I said earlier, I was willing to sweep the floor if the floor needed to be swept. I was willing to do dirty work. And by the time that we had gone 3 years, I was on par or ahead of all of those other 16. And I've kept track of them because, again, I'm ultra competitive and have a chip on my shoulder. And I think that I've probably outcompeted them from a career standpoint. So I think, again, if you ever have kind of feel like the world is sliding you or don't have confidence, the only thing you can control is how hard you work. And I think, again, that's the kind of the Aggie spirit that I think gets instilled with us from the Huntsman School, et cetera. Work hard to be a good person, and it'll really take care of itself. The last one I'll really hit is whether you're going to go and start a sole proprietorship and be an entrepreneur, whether you're going to go into a big corporate environment, do recognize that the world is full of good people. Find those good people and ask them to help you with your path. The more I experience from people, I think almost all people have good within them. All we have to do is essentially ask, and most people are very willing to help support. So I think don't be shy in asking for mentors. Don't be shy in asking peers for help and understanding how they do things well. That's where I think life gets easier as a team sport. So I'll just say in general, be excited for your future. You have so many cool decisions in front of you. I think it's super scary. I was kind of scared leaving business school and going to the real world. So that's a normal feeling you should have. And that's how it's supposed to be. But there are a lot bigger, scarier things ahead of you. But that's really, I think, as we overcome some of those fears, as we overcome the obstacles, that's when we really feel like we're winning, and that's where the joy in life really comes. So best of luck as you chart your courses forward.
That's really fantastic. There have been so many great little nuggets of knowledge, from building your own board of directors to knowing that you don't have to be in this by yourself. You have a community, you've got extra resources. So thank you so much. I really want to, if we were in person, we would be applauding you. Really appreciate your time with us today here, Chris. Just a couple of reminders for the folks watching at home. We do have more Backpack to Briefcase, backpack to backpack. Maybe we should change that for next year. But we do have more workshops coming up talking about graduate school, informational interviews, and the importance of social intelligence in the workspace. So keep an eye out on the Huntsman events calendar. And if you've missed any topics in the past, feel free to review that playlist on our YouTube channel. But once again, thank you so much, Chris. It's been wonderful having you join us today. Love hearing everything you have to say.